Our next speaker, William Lazonick, is a professor of economics at the University of Massachusetts Lowell, where he directs the Center for Industrial Competitiveness. He is co-founder and president of the Academic Industry Research Network. Lazonick's article, Profits Without Prosperity, Stock Buybacks Manipulate the Market and Leave Most Americans Worse Off, from the Harvard Business Review, September of 2014, has received widespread attention. Our next speaker.
Okay, I'll need my slides up there. Okay, put it full screen. Okay, thanks. Okay, it's great to be here. I'm going to go through a lot of actually complicated stuff in a very short period of time. There's a lot of graphics. Only got 20 minutes, and I'm going to give you the big picture. There's a big problem. And if you think that the SEC is a problem from the last speech, you'll really think it's a problem after hearing this. It's not just not monitoring the problem, it is part of the problem. Okay, so let me start here. How do these change? Excuse me, someone needs to show me how this thing works. It's not, oh, need some, okay, there it goes. Is that working? Okay, all right. Do I need to aim this somewhere to get it to work properly? It's not going to work. I can't give the talk if this thing doesn't work. Okay. All right. Okay, so just mentioned I had an article in Harvard Business Review with the typical Harvard Business Review title, Profits Without Prosperity, How Stock Buybacks Manipulate the Market and Make Most Americans Worse Off. That was a bit of a joke. It's not the typical title, but it actually not only got a lot of attention, but won the prize for best article in Harvard Business Review of that year. And I think that people were reading this thing and saying, hey, something's going on here that I didn't know about, that I should know about, whether I'm for the system or against the system, wherever I stand. And I led off the article with this graph of percent changes in productivity growth, percent changes in wages from 1946 to 2012, a long period of time. In the beginning, the first few decades after World War II, wages tracked productivity growth. Then there was a divergence. Change in productivity growth increased, but wages did not at the same pace. I break this down into two parts. The first period, I call the old economy business model. The basis of that growth in wages, tracking growth and productivity, was career employment in one company. There was the norm in major companies in the United States. Mainly white males had this privilege, but it was a norm for blue-collar and white-collar workers. That changed from the late 70s, especially during the 1980s, and we had a new economy business model coming out of Silicon Valley, but spreading throughout the country. Insecure jobs, globalized labor. You went away from defined benefit pensions, defined contribution pensions. You have massive stock buybacks, exploding executive pay, and the erosion of middle-class employment opportunities as careers in companies disappear. And it's all part and parcel of the same thing. I called these things, this change, I summarize them as corporate research allocation regimes, as a change from retain and reinvest to downsize and distribute. Okay, now there's an article in Brookings Institution, another left-wing organization, that published my article on this. This was unusual, but it was a result of the attention that the Harvard Business Review article got, so one thing leads to another, and I laid this out there. It's online, anybody can read it. Now, if we're going to deal with the U.S. economy, we're dealing with very large corporations. So here we see 10,000 companies, or less than 1,000 companies with more than 10,000 workers. What they do or they don't do, or the companies with 5,000 or more workers, affects the whole of the economy. And there are people who control what those companies do. They're the senior executives. And they allocate resources. And economists talk about allocating resources through the markets. This is where resources are allocated. What they do or they not do affects everybody. Small business, large business, everybody. Okay. Now, here's what they've been doing. This is net equity issues. This is Federal Reserve data, low fund data. Stock issues minus stock buybacks and stock retired as a result of merger and acquisition activity. And when it becomes negative, it's almost all stock buybacks that's driving it negative. You can see that starts in 1984. You'll find out in a few minutes why it was in 1984 it started. It went up and down, but it became very negative from after the internet crash of 2001 in the boom up to 2007, and then you have a lot of volatility. Okay, now these numbers I translated into 2015 dollars, so you can see the increase in buybacks going from net equity issues, at least net equity issues, going from positive to negative, and you can see them in comparison to the size of the economy, in this case looking at GDP. So they're not only big, but they become bigger, they're massive. They will become bigger unless they're stopped. Okay. Now, here are companies, the same companies going back to 1981 to 2015. So we're looking at the very same companies. There's 236 companies that were in the S&P 500 index in January 2016. And you can see that in 1981, buybacks were minimal. I could go back further. There were very little in the way of buybacks in the 70s. They start in the mid-1980s, and you can see, again, they become massive. So this is not net. This is the actual buybacks these companies are doing. They're not instead of dividends. Basically, they're in addition to dividends. And dividends actually are growing, as, and these are, again, in real terms. These have been adjusted for inflation. Okay, this is just going back 10 years, so it's 459 companies. It's all the same companies. And you can see, again, they start doing buybacks, reaching a peak in 2007. They declined during the financial crisis, and then they're off and running again. Last year, you have buybacks per company about $1.2 billion, and dividends about $830 million in addition. The money is flowing out. This is what I call distribute, and there's a lot of downsides here. Often companies will lay off a lot of workers just to do a lot of buybacks. They'll borrow money to do buybacks, sell off assets, etc. Okay, this is FactSet, a company that puts these data out quarterly, and what you can see here is that almost that green line, almost all the companies in the S&P 500 do buybacks, and they do buybacks. The red line is the S&P 500 index. They do it when the stock market's high, not when it's low. They're trying to use them to push up the stock market. This will become important in an argument to make later. Now, why do they do buybacks? The SEC allows them to do buybacks. And back in November of 1982, as a direct result of electing Ronald Reagan, there was a rule passed, Rule 10b-18, which basically, among other things, says that a company has a safe harbor if it does no more than 25% of its average daily trading volume of the previous 4 weeks as buybacks on a single day. Now, for most companies, large companies, that'd be about 200 million a day. They can do it day after day after day. Apple, it's about 1.4 billion a day. Microsoft is about 500 million a day. ExxonMobil, one of the biggest repurchaser of stock, about 250 million a day, and day after day after day. We don't actually know the days when they're doing that. That becomes an issue as well that we'll come back to. The safe harbor means that there's no presumption if they do more than 25% ADTV, that this is manipulation. And in fact, the SEC, because it doesn't collect data from the companies, didn't want to burden them with having to disclose this data. It doesn't know how much they're doing on any single day. And so there's never been any kind of investigation, never mind litigation, against companies for insider trading, for exceeding the buyback limit, etc., since 1982. There is no monitoring of this process. So there is about the only article, it's a headline from the Wall Street Journal. It's the only article appeared at the time. It's a very good article. SEC eases away for repurchase of firm stock. Agency assures it won't file charges of manipulation if certain rules are met. So it says it there. There's manipulation going, but it won't file the charges. And there he is, John Shad, who was the first guy appointed chair of the SEC from Wall Street since Joseph Kennedy, right 6 months at the beginning of the SEC in the late mid-30s. He was the first person on Wall Street to come out for Reagan's presidency and was the head of Reagan's New York State campaign, and that was his prize. Okay. He reshaped the SEC from being a regulator of the stock market to being a promoter of the stock market and financial markets more generally. Okay, now, shouldn't shareholders like buybacks? No, not unless they are basically in the business of selling shares and knowing when to sell shares and timing the selling of shares. Those people can gain from them, but shareholders in general, anybody holding shares, really holding shares, loses them. So someone in his early 40s said to me, after the article came out in Harvard Business Review, I like buybacks because my company does them. I have my company stock in 401k. I said, you're in your early 40s? He said, yeah. He said, well, you're not going to touch that money for 20 years. I said, buybacks are not going to do you any good. Even if they're done 19 years from now, they're not going to do you any good. The bump to the stock market will be gone. Have them put it in an interest-bearing asset and just accumulate the money rather than to do buybacks. On the other hand, dividends will go into your 401k and accrued tax deferred. Okay. The dividends are the way in which you should reward shareholders or give shareholders money, not even rewarding them, they're just buying the shares and give them some income. Give us some income if we hold the shares. If we're shareholders, we don't want them to give us 100% of dividends because we want them to reinvest and we want the company to be something, have some products, have some revenues, have some profits, have a decent stock price if and when we decide to sell the stock. The people who are gaining from stock buybacks are professional share sellers. They're not shareholders, and they're top corporate executives, hedge fund managers, particularly hedge fund activists, but hedge fund managers, people on Wall Street generally. They are in the business of timing the sale of shares, figuring out when the buybacks are being done, and they're the ones who are making money. The only way anybody makes money from buybacks is if then they sell the shares, and timing is everything. Okay, now what's the damage that's done by buybacks? Okay, companies' retained earnings are the basis of corporate finance, investment of productive capabilities. You invest in plant and equipment, research and development, and most importantly, training and retaining employees. Okay, and until the 1980s, economists, executives said, okay, we have to keep enough money in companies to sustain the corporation. That all changed in the name of maximizing shareholder value from the mid-1980s, and it's not by accident that we see stock buybacks becoming a problem since that time. Okay, so I have this as a paper online, Institute for New Economic Thinking, which ties together the concentration of income at the top, the erosion of middle-class jobs. They're two sides of the same buyback coin, and they've been going on massively for decades, as has both of these phenomena, the rise of inequality and the erosion of middle-class jobs. And a big part of that top 0.1% is our corporate executives and the pay that they make. Okay, now why do companies do buybacks? This is in the Harvard Business Review article. I go through this basically very quickly. 3 reasons. They're making investment company stocks undervalued. It doesn't work. In fact, they're buying them at high prices. So that's not the reason they're doing this. Executive claims that they're doing this to offset dilution when all their employees exercise their stock options. Well, there's no logic to that. If you're given to give someone stock options, you want them to work harder and smarter, develop the products, get them out there, get the revenues, get the profits. Your stock price will rise in the future. Then they can sell their shares at a higher price. You don't need stock buybacks. Stock buybacks are just manipulating the market to give them a gain now without doing all that. And that's, in effect, what they're doing. And a big reason they're doing it, as we'll see, is because corporate executives benefit immensely from stock-based pay. Okay, the third reason they claim is, the company's mature, there's no investment to make. Fire those CEOs. If you're running a major company and you have no investments to make, with all the capabilities you have, then you should be out of there. Okay, the only logical reason why companies do buybacks is because we allow corporate executives to be incentivized and rewarded for doing this, and it's their stock-based pay. Now here, I'll turn to this now. This is data from the Sayes and Piketty and colleagues, and they show the rise of income inequality. A bigger part of its salaries. A lot of that salary is stock-based pay, except you can't see it in the IRS data that they used. This is data from proxy statements on the actual take-home pay of executives. We pull out the 500 highest paid each year, and you can see the black line is the average. So in 2015 is 32.6 million on average. Over 80% is stock-based pay, stock options, stock awards. Stock awards have become bigger over time. There's an article now that's on the INET website, Mismeasure of Mammon, Uses Abuse of Executive Pay, of which I'm co-author, in which we show that virtually every figure for CEO pay reported by the media, think tanks, and even union members are fictitious numbers based on FASB-approved and SEC-sanctioned fair value estimates that bear little relation to these CEOs' take-home pay, reported the IRS. Okay, so that include articles like this that appeared last spring. Every number that as presented in there is a fiction. It's not what they got paid. Okay, there's an article on the Atlantic now, which you can read, and you'll get much more of an explanation I give you now. But I'll give you some, here are some data from that article. The orange line is what's called estimated fair value total pay, and the green line is actual realized gains. Okay, this is for the top 500, compared, ranked by each type, and the realized gains far outstrip the estimated fair value that everyone used. This is just looking at the stock-based portion of that for people who are highest ranked by average realized gains, and you can see that the stock gains, the solid lines, which are the gains, red one for options, blue for awards, far outstrip the fictitious gains, fictitious pay, and the fictitious pay actually doesn't even reflect the stock market. Here's an article by Jeffrey Sachs, which is a good article criticizing Gilead Sciences for being a price gouger, and it says that their CEO took home $19 million in 2014, the spoils of untrammeled greed. Here's what CEO actually took home in 2014. It was $193 million. The reported fair value numbers equivalent to the one for 2014 is also about 19 million. It was actually 232 million. Okay, here's another example. Mylan, EpiPen. Everybody's reporting 18.9 million. They're outraged. Heather Prescott, 18.9 million in 2015. That's fiction. The fact is 44.4 million. That's what she actually took home. That's what she put in the bank. That's what she paid taxes on. Wells Fargo, the CEO himself said in testimony that he made 19.5 million. The fair value figure is 19.3 million. The fictitious figure, the actual figure was 44.2 million. Senator Menendez didn't know that, and he should have known that, and said, no, that's not what you actually took home and put in the bank and paid. Okay, why does this matter? It matters because it's the actual realized gains, not the estimated fair value, that incentivize and rewards executives. The executives of these companies, their big paydays came from rapid price boosts. For the pharmaceutical companies, they got it by price gouging. From Wells Fargo, they got it by creating fake accounts. Then buybacks provided, in all these cases, additional support to their price boosts. Sometimes they don't have as much price gouging, but they get it just from the stock buybacks. That's what it's all about. Okay, unfortunately, the AFL-CIO, can I have 2 extra minutes here? Because I just want to go. Okay, the AFL-CIO has, on its executive pay watch website, it unfortunately uses estimated fair value figures. We haven't replicated their figures, but we're pretty sure that if you took the same CEOs that they use, it would be about twice as much almost, the CEO to worker pay ratio. Now we have this institutionalized as part of Dodd-Frank through the SEC, which has the pay ratio disclosure rule. The pay ratio disclosure rule, which is supposed to reflect inequality in companies, the CEO paid to the median worker, it's going to use the fair value measure. It will tend to underestimate income inequality in those companies because of underestimating executive pay. One member of Congress has, Tammy Baldwin, Senator Tammy Baldwin, has been going after the SEC on this issue. Elizabeth Warren has also on a broader set of issues, but not on this issue. Sent 2 letters to the SEC. Mary Jo White, the chair of the SEC, admitted in response to one of them effectively that they're not monitoring buybacks. And a second letter, Senator Baldwin, I won't read the whole thing, but she says, the overarching reason I am interested in buybacks is that I'm concerned that they come at the expense of investment in innovation, research, and workers that are necessary for stable and equitable economic growth, as academic studies have suggested. Finally, this is my last two slides, the SEC, and this was mentioned before by the last speaker, says that its mission is to protect investors, maintain fair, orderly, efficient markets, and facilitate capital formation. It's doing none of these. It's doing none of these. That's not what the SEC is doing. So as far as buybacks and executive pay is concerned, buybacks generate gains for share sellers, not shareholders. It's not protecting shareholders. Buybacks manipulate stock prices and make the stock market more volatile. That's not protecting, creating orderly markets. Buybacks undermine capital formation. They do not promote capital formation. They add to the war chest of the Carl Icahns and John Paulsons, etc. Okay. The SEC privileges fiction over fact in the reporting of executive pay. This is, might be shocking, but it's true, and you should all read what we've written on this because it's new. We're the first people who really uncovered this systematically. The stock-based pay incentivizes executives to engage and downsize and distribute, not retain and reinvest. Now, if the SEC wants a mission, I have a mission for the SEC. To fulfill its mission, the SEC must advocate retain and reinvest, not downsize and distribute, and we'll have a very different economy than we have now. Thanks.